Do you feel like you've gotten funnier, less funny, or different but equally funny from 7 years ago, on stage particularly?
That's interesting because my favorite special is my earlier specials. I think those are like the funniest / silliest. And then as I grow as an artist, just as you grow as a human being, the comedy itself gets more complicated. Mm-hmm. And because I'm talking about things, I'm much more proud of the older one, the newer ones.
Because you feel they're
more honest. I'm digging deeper. I'm being more honest about what it's like to be getting older, to becoming a father, all these different things. So,
but you hold on, go. You finish that. I interrupted you. Though you're prouder of the newer stuff,
I'm prouder of my newest stuff,
but
it's not as straight, silly, funny as my early stuff.
And what are the benefits of the straight, silly, funny?
Everybody's invited. You just go and you laugh and you have a silly, fun time. There's some, but there's less. I just feel like as you get older and as you mature as an artist, the soup just gets thicker.
Are those two things guided together, getting older and becoming more mature as an artist?
Yes. If you're paying attention, I think, yeah.
And it should be that way.
I would say so. Here's what I do. When I'm watching other people do comedy, I sometimes imagine who I consider the greats to be doing the bit they're doing.
Who are the greats? Name no order. Just name some of them.
Well, Chappelle would be a good example, and I understand some of it. It's hard to say because Louis, I understand, has been scandalized.
It's fine. Louis is amazing.
I just happen to be scandal noted, a fan of his stand-up comedy.
Yes.
Yeah, I feel like I will say less so because I wish he had dealt with all of it better, but still.
I understand that too.
Do you understand?
Yeah.
It's thin ice. I'm not keeping my finger on the pulse of how we're supposed to talk about these things. But
I hate that we have to supposed to.
I know. But as stand-ups, Louis and Dave, flaws aside, we're always the guys that I'm like, these people are sending the bucket in their well pretty down. They're going deep. They're going deep into what it feels like to be a grown
Does
human.
Bill Burr scratch the surface to you?
Yeah, Bill Burr.
He's-
Yeah, Bill Burr.
I just saw him at the Comedy Store recently doing some new stuff and talking about like going to shows. And we made a joke that you love to go watch comedy on your off nights. You don't do that when you're someplace. Sometimes you watch when you're at a venue. But very rarely do I truly feel like I'm in the audience. You know,
I've never felt in the audience. That's the whole point of being a performer. Is even when you're a little boy, you recognize. I had a bit about this. I was like, every time my parents would take me to a play, I was really earnestly waiting for them to tap me on the shoulder and bring me on stage.
But I'm saying with Bill, I do, even though it almost never happens, with Bill, I am in the audience.
Yeah.
I'm watching
and I saw
magic.
Chappelle at Radio City, and I wasn't a comedian for an hour and a half. But like the thing that those voices give us is, to me, a pretty interesting litmus test where it's like, okay, this nonsense bit that I'm doing, and I'm not saying you can't occasionally do a nonsense bit. I think all three of those comedians occasionally do a bit that is a little bit lighter fare. But like you watch other comedians and I'm like, the greats would never do that. And I strive to do what the greats would do, to become one of the greats, right? So the greats don't, I mean, Brian Regan is one of the greats and he does
First
silly
album
fun.
I ever listened to.
I love that for you.
I just loved him.
I love him still.
Not that many people on the podcast bring him up.
I realize saying I love that for you sounded like fuck you, but I really mean like I love that.
It sounded a little condescending.
I know, because that show made it. I used to think that phrase was okay to say. I'm learning it's not okay to say. Anyway, meaning it, you're going to sound insincere. Brian Regan is a silly funny and he's one of the greats. So there's a way to do it. For me, I'm finding as I'm getting older, my specials get a little bit less pure, silly funny. Mm-hmm. But they get way deeper. I'm doing jokes about the natures of existence. These bits find traction in lives on social and all this stuff that makes me really proud. But if I'm like looking for like a good old fashioned honky tonk throwdown with Pete Holmes, I'm watching Faces and Sounds.
You're watching what?
Faces and Sounds.
Hold on, I can't hear you. Say it again.
We're in the same room.
It's just a figure of speech. But I actually didn't hear you. So say it one more time.
Faces and Sounds is my first HBO special. And it's very silly. There's one or two bits in there that I'm like, oh, I'm trying to say something, but for the most part, I'm just going like, one of the bits is called Deep Voice Kid, and it's a true story. I was at a pool, there was a kid behind me. I couldn't see him, but he had a really deep voice, and he just kept being like, "Mommy, Mom," but it sounded like a man. That's it. And sometimes that's what you want. Green eggs and ham, double snakes. These are the bits that I do when I do a corporate. Like I have to be clean. And they're like very simple, silly bits. And I sort of miss them. Now I get on stage and I'm like, you believe in God or you believe in nothing? It's the same thing. Either God, you call your nothing God, or you call your God nothing. Like either way, we all believe in something you can't photograph, something you can't explain, spontaneously erupted into everything that is. Same team. And that is, from where I'm sitting, 1,000 times more interesting than double snakes. But there is part of me that misses the silly funny.
So what do you do with that missing? Accepting that it's gone, or do you chase it at all?
Isn't that what we do in our lives? I mean, I'm trying to keep the levels of my silly funny in my ordinary life, how I am with my wife, how I am with my daughter. I want to keep those levels up. But watching Bill Burr, I've known Bill for 20 years almost, and it's like, been watching him for that long, certainly. I've watched him grow and perform. I remember Bill was one of the first people I opened for. And so was Jim Gaffigan. I got really lucky. My friend Dan Kaufman out of Chicago, there you go. Great, funny comedian, great guy. He got me these gigs, emceeing for Bill Burr and Jim Gaffigan. And I remember when I was in New York for some reason. It was in front of the Cellar, and I was basically an open micer, and I had emceed for Gaffigan, and I was about to go MC for Bill Burr. And I'm only saying this to be like, look how far. Bill Burr is now Bill Burr, all caps on the marquee. But there was a time when Gaffigan said to me, he was like, who are you going out on the road with? And I said, Bill Burr. And this was so long ago that Gaffigan went, Billy Burr? Like he couldn't believe that he was headlining. I like that story because it's like, yeah, he's a Titan now, but every Titan at some point was figuring it out. And I think that's really beautiful. Gaffigan is actually a great example. He struggled for like a decade. Or I've heard stories that he was almost like, not a punchline, but somebody that people made fun of. Like, oh, the weird guy from Indiana won't stop trying. Now he's one of the fucking biggest comedians of all time. I feel like in the movie we delete that struggling time is just a montage. I think that's the most interesting point in your career.
Bill Burr, still though, his energy is so silly. Even though he's very direct and almost aggressive, his voice and his, like there's still like a silliness that's built into me.
It's interesting. I wouldn't really agree with that. Only because I can tell you like a good midrash.
What does that mean?
Oh.
What does midrash mean?
Usually when two rabbis are debating about the Old Testament, it's called a midrash.
So what would be the midrash?
Just a good old-fashioned argument.
Oh, I thought you were saying you know of a midrash that would change my mind.
Oh, no. This is a midrash. What I'm saying is I'm only disagreeing because I feel like you like the energy of a disagreement. Meaning there are a few bits that Bill's doing and I'm like, I think he's just he's just saying what he thinks. I don't see
I agree. I don't think
glimmer in his eye that he's like, I'm just fucking around. Like I'm like, maybe he does. He certainly walks the line.
Got you. Silly isn't always by design. It's just some things are silly.
I'm with you. He's a funny guy. So even if he's getting super worked up, you're like, it's still
there's a character behind it, even though it's real.
Yeah, exactly.
Man, he's so funny.
He's one of the kings. So, I mean, I'm not giving you advice. I find value in when I'm watching other comedians go, picture Bill Burr doing this bit. You know what I'm saying? Or pick whoever your favorite is and go, would they do this bit? And when you're doing bits, go like, would the greats do this bit? And you're like, probably not. But the bit...
I've never thought of that way.
I don't do... With me... This is what I'll say. I don't mean to be self-serving. The material I'm doing now, I'm like, this is Pete being as great of a Pete as Pete can be. This is being honest.
Yeah.
There's bits that I'm getting uncomfortably close to my own vulnerability hangover the next day.
Like talking about how much money you have.
Well, I actually like things that bump up against my ego and make me squirm because it makes me wonder why.
I love being uncomfortable, not because uncomfortable feels good, but it makes me know that what I'm going to say matters.
I would completely agree with that. And that's why when Ali Wong did the bit about being a millionaire, I was like, I'm envious because I hadn't yet gotten there to the point where you could admit something like that. To me, the go-tos are always like, I had a bit about how I hate my girlfriend's parents, like always, just whoever my girlfriend was. I hate your parents. Get your fucking parents out of here. And when I started doing that bit, I got the charge of what it feels like to say something that usually you were told for 30 years, be a good boy, don't say things like that.
Or if you do say it like this. Huh? Or if you do say it like this.
Exactly.
Yeah, the things where you feel like you have to acknowledge that I shouldn't.
You mentioned it earlier. Nothing is really gained, learned, by us pretending, to quote Bill Burr, if everything you thought was printed out and handed out, who would have a job tomorrow? Nobody. But it's lonely. You want to talk about religion, religio, reconnecting.
Ligaments.
When I go on stage and be like, I hate my girlfriend's parents, that hopefully can heal you if you've had an experience like that.
You being the audience listening.
Yeah, you being the person listening to me right now.
Oh yeah!